Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Superman and Lois Season 3 review series. And today I am going to be talking about episode 5, Head On, which I have just finished watching. And this episode, once again, as always, fantastic. And this episode was a little bit more emotional, so there wasn't as much action. Not saying that there wasn't, but there was a bit of action, but this was mostly very heavy story driven and very heavy dialogue driven, which I eat all that stuff up, especially for breakfast. But this episode was really good. I really enjoyed this one a lot. And we got a little surprise at the end. Something that I didn't think we were going to get, but I'm really glad we are. And the surprise that we got at the end, I think, is going to make season 3 even more epic than it is already. And also, there's been speculation about whether or not we could see Doomsday in season 3. I highly doubt that, but I'm not completely outruling it. But, however, with everything that's been going on in the last 4 episodes and now 5 episodes so far, never say never. You never know what could happen. And that's the beauty of Superman and Lois. Just when you think you've got all of the answers, they change the questions. So this was really good to watch, and the whole story arc with Lois's cancer while trying to bring down Bruno Mannheim and Intergang, it's been really good. I've really been enjoying that a lot. And, Clark trying to be a hero, of course, trying to be a dad and trying to be there for Lois. Great stuff. Great TV, I think. And, you know, although we didn't see a lot of Superman action, as I mentioned earlier, there wasn't much action. When we did get the action, it was great. And that's what I like about this show. Even if there isn't hardly any action in an episode, when we do get it, whew, it's great. So, as always, I'm going to give a quick recap of what's happened so far. And then after that, we're going to get straight into talking about episode 5. So, as we saw previously in episode 4, we saw Candace's dad give Jonathan a black eye and try to pull a gun on Lois. And this led to not Superman, but Clark Kent confronting Candace's dad, threatening him, and scaring him into skipping town. So that was really cool to see, and definitely got Man of Steel and Superman 2 vibes, where Clark basically puts the bully in their place. And also in episode 4, we learn that Intergang, of course, already has samples of Superman's blood, and they've been synthesizing it using DoD technology. So Superman has all of his blood destroyed. And also at the end of episode 4, we see Sam Lane presents Jordan with a suit so he doesn't have to cut his hair, because as we saw at the beginning of episode 4, somebody took a picture of Jordan doing heroic saves with his dad. Didn't see his face though, but obviously the back of his head and his long hair was a dead giveaway. So we see Sam just trying to help him conceal his identity in a similar manner to the way Clark conceals his Superman identity. And we also saw Lois Lane has signed herself up as a chemo patient at a hospital in Hobbs Bay, which is an area run, of course, by Bruno Mannheim. So that's pretty much what happened in episode 4, and it did a great job in helping to set up for episode 5. So, with that all said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into it. Let's talk about episode 5, Head On. So, this episode opens up with the Kent household, with Lois preparing to go to the Hobbs Bay Medical Center for her second round of chemotherapy. The same day, Smallville High is holding a Valentine's Day dance at a local clubhouse, and Lois is determined to attend to see everyone having a good time, despite repeated requests from Clark and her family not to go through such stress. Candace has settled in nicely in the Kent household and is sharing a loving bond with Lois, much to the annoyance and dismay of Jordan. Outside the house, Sam shares his concern with Clark about the risk of getting admitted into a facility being run by Bruno Mannheim, and given the fact that he previously attempted to threaten John Henry and made murderous attempts on both Lois and Superman. He fears for Lois's well-being and misplaces her priority. However, Lois is too headstrong to listen to anybody, so she sets off with Clark to reach their destination. We also see in this episode at the facility, Lois goes through all the necessary procedures while Clark is present to lend support to his wife. They look up the encouraging messages written by several cancer patients and survivors and try their best to encourage each other, but a faint expression of anxiety appears on Clark's face. Lois makes a desperate attempt to search for Dr. Hook's files by roaming across the facility, dragging her still attached IV stand with her, and making Clark wait for her to return. We also see Clark and Lois are busy in Metropolis for a treatment and investigation, while everybody else is preparing for the big dance at Smallville High. At the Kent farm, Sam brings ATVs and spends the day racing with Natalie. As we all know already, in Natalie's Earth, Sam was her grandfather. So on this Earth, Sam Lane is trying his best to make Natalie feel at home on this world with little gestures instead of rushing in and forcing things like he was doing in earlier episodes. We see Mateo, the boy Natalie bonded with in Metropolis, comes to visit her in Smallville and expresses his wish to join her for the Smallville dance event. Jonathan offers to help Kyle Cushion after spotting him by the roadside with his car flat-lined. Kyle appreciates his goodwill, and after a friendly chat, he asks John to assist him with the fireman drills on the weekends. Jonathan is delighted at the offer and accepts it there and there. After all, he doesn't have to have powers to be a hero, and while Jordan can deal with the bigger threats across the world, Jonathan can keep his feet on the ground and help people all the time. In Smallville Square, we see Lana and Sarah trying to reconcile their strained relationship over breakfast at the diner when Junior, the deceased Mayor Dean's son, appears and wrongfully accuses Lana of his father's death. Lois is dumbfounded and she later opines to Chrissy that if only Junior had known about the corruption Mayor Dean indulged in, he wouldn't have accused her like this. Chrissy remarked that unless Lana is exposing the entirety in public, accusations like these will be frequent given how people are still confused about Dean's murder. During the dance event, everyone gathers in the clubhouse dressed to the nines and participates in the dance. During their dance, as Mateo comes close to kiss Natalie, Natalie freaks out and leaves. Sam follows her and gets to understand that what was going on with her, and we see that Natalie feels isolated from socializing for too long due to all the problems she had to deal with at an earlier age. Natalie never got a hang of forming relationships and stuff, and she even admits that she's never had a boyfriend or kissed a guy before. Sam shares his lack of emotional availability that stemmed from his wife leaving him 30 years ago, and he understands the dilemma that Nat is going through. Getting assurance from Sam that her actions weren't too out of place, Natalie calls Sam grandfather for the first time. Oh, nice. It feels great to see Sam taking time off his duties and in general making an effort to form an emotional connection with someone, and that person with being Natalie, who needs people to be around her, especially as she's in a new world. Meanwhile, Jonathan gets to know from Candace that she has found a place to stay, which is at her aunt's and quite a distance from Smallville. The only time John had afforded to go and see her is on weekends, and John asks Kyle to shift the schedule of the fireman drills if it is possible. Kyle gives him advice and asks John to figure out what it is he wants and to prioritize exactly what his priorities are. After Candace gets to know about this, she emphasizes that Jonathan takes his drills seriously and attends them on the weekends. She speculates that they'll work something out about the meetings, but neither of them is sure how. Sarah meets with Junior and learns that his previous unwarranted responses were caused by the anguish over his father's death. Later, as Lana arrives to check up on Sarah, she learns about this too after accusing Sarah of drinking alcohol at a party. While Clark anxiously waits for Lois to return, a couple of cancer patients admit their predicaments to Clark about how they're dealing with cancer. We see Clark listen to both patients' experiences as they give details of how physically and mentally draining cancer is and their first hand experience with suffering from the disease, as well as losing people close to them, which of course gets to Clark. In the meantime, Lois sneaks inside several different areas of the health facility and confronts Bruno Mannheim himself. After Lois accuses him of experimenting on people who have a reduced lifespan due to cancer, Bruno tries to appeal to Lois's generous side instead by showing how much he has done for the community. He recounts that toxic waste disposal near suicide slums resulted in her mother's cancer and eventual death, and that he vowed to make a real change. And he did so by creating the clinic and the state-of-the-art research center to tackle the disease and wresting control from the giants that left their neighborhood in utter negligence for so long. Bruno tells Lois that he will assist in her treatment in any way possible, but he won't allow her to sabotage his noble mission of saving his people. After the treatment ends, Lois returns with Clark. After his interaction with Superman and Steel, Bruno makes his presence felt during his conversation with Lois too. We also see that he appears on the surface to Lois as a generous humanitarian, but then on the other side, we see he is every bit the villain when he is confronted by John Henry Irons. We also see after Lois and Clark return home, Clark urges her not to put a strain on herself by going to the dance event, but to no avail. Just as they dress up and are about to leave, a distress call from the DoD alerts Clark of an attack conducted by the supervillain Deadline. We also see Henry Miller, another cancer victim supervillain. James DiStefano, who is better known as Deadline, was released on parole by Judge Regan, and Bruno experimented on him to give him superpowers as well. We see Superman arrive and a fight ensues with Deadline gaining the upper hand due to his phasing powers, but Superman manages to knock him down after catching him off guard. However, the delay gives the villain enough time to get his hands on confidential information from the DoD, and he leaves. After returning, Clark sees that Lois is unable to go to the event due to the effects of the chemotherapy treatment. Hurting mentally and physically, Lois admits that she should also consider others' opinions regarding her treatment and tries to be less reckless. We see later on the rest of the family, Sam and Candace, return from the event, but they have forgotten to take in pictures to show Lois. Clark arranges a small dance in the room instead. In the meantime, we see Jordan introduces Sam to a dating app. Interesting. The next day, we see Lana tells Chrissy that she's decided not to reveal Dean's corruption to the people of Smallville and instead wants them to remember as being a good father and a good man. We also see Chrissy and Kyle have spent the night together as well. And then we see in the Kent household, Candace leaves for her aunt's home with John and everybody else seeing her off. Sam shares his concern about a significant problem with Clark. The fact that the confidential information stolen by Deadline had the locations of some of the DoD's extremely important assets, one of which has been missing. We then see Bruno Mannheim's underground hideout, and we see his team have got their hands on the Bizarro Superman. And that's how we end episode 5. Overall, brilliant episode, very heavily emotion, very heavy dialogue driven. But this was really good. You know, we got to see a different side of Clark instead of being the husband and the hero all the time. We've got to see him just be more in a supportive role. So that was really good. And, you know, we got to see a bit of Superman action, which was great. And Bruno Mannheim getting hold of Bizarro's body. Didn't see that coming. You know, I've heard whispers that maybe Bruno Mannheim might be making his own Doomsday creature, but the fact that he's got hold of Bizarro's body says to me that there's a possibility that he could create a new clone of Bizarro. We know what happens. Anyone who's read Superman comics or has watched the Superman cartoons, you know that cloning never ends well. But overall, I really enjoyed this one a lot, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this is all going to play out. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on episode 5? Did you enjoy it? What did you think of seeing Clark in a supportive role for Lois? Did you enjoy the dialogue driven approach for this one? And also, what's your thoughts on Bruno Mannheim getting hold of Bizarro's body? What plans does he have? Is it possible that he could make a second Bizarro clone? Or do you think he could try to revive Bizarro? Because as we all remember, this Bizarro wasn't cloned. He came from Bizarro World, which is referred to as the inverse. So, what do you think Bruno Mannheim has up his sleeve next? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Superman and Lois Season 3 review series, where I am going to be talking about episode 6, which I am very much looking forward to talking about and seeing, especially with the way this episode ended. It's going to be epic, and I can't wait. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Bizarro once again. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.